USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the USCHO Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, February 10th, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast is brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Well, the big game comes up on Monday, and that's the championship of the 69th Beanpot, as you will see BU taking on Northeastern.
And joining us now to preview the final of the 69th Beanpot between Northeastern and Boston University. He's the color voice for NESN for these broadcasts. He's also an in-studio analyst for both NESN and NHL Network, covering the NHL and the Boston Bruins. It's Billy Jaffe. Jaffe, great games Monday night, and I think that besides just the hockey, I think anybody that was there just enjoyed being back in that building for college hockey.
Well, and not just college hockey, Jimmy, but for an event. That was the other thing. And because of how traditional it is, how much it is part of the fabric. And in particular, the last few years, the Beanpot has started to re-resonate again in the area because I do believe because of Northeastern's success. Because they've brought out the fans. It's now antagonized maybe, or sparked is maybe the better word, tweaked some of the other fans to come to the building as well. And we've now gotten that theater that we were missing for a while at the Beanpot. But it feels to be back. It's great. It's fun. You're right. People were dying to come out. It's loving to come out to a building like that. We had over 15,000 on Monday night. And I expect a big crowd. I won't say the word sellout, but I expect it's going to look like a sellout. Because who knows on Monday night for BU and Northeastern.
It feels a little strange, not just to be back in a building, which is strange, but also because of the Olympics, some of these rosters are missing some of the best players. And you end up with two teams advancing last Monday night with backup goaltenders. And that you don't see, with both Devin Levi and I just brain farted on the B. with both Devin Levi and Drew Comesso over in China playing in the Olympics, you ended up with two backup goaltenders, and they both had success. That was a great story in itself.
So what is our lesson that we've learned? Goaltending doesn't matter, basically, when it's all said and done. Just kidding. Listen, there's no question about it that it's funny. I was asked not so much to predict, but I was asked, to say who's the favorite going in. And I did pick BU. Even though they didn't have Comesso. And I said, after that, I thought Northeastern, even though they didn't have Levi, because I just feel the depth of their lineups they are most intact, right? I mean, Northeastern, yes, you're missing Devin, but you've still got a good D crew. And you've got guys from a few years ago that have been there and they know the winning tradition that they now have at Northeastern. And for BU, they probably have the most experience. I don't know games played probably have it. And especially if you go down the middle of their lineup, they have it. So with all that said, getting back to your comment about that's unusual. Well, I felt that both goalies played within themselves, their game. Like Comesso, awesome. And Duplessis didn't have to be Drew Comesso. He just had to be Vinny, right? He just had to be good. And I thought he was. He showed a little bit of his way of skating, his handling of plays. And even though when Harvard got close, he didn't buckle at all. He just, okay, no problem, reset. With regard to Northeastern, Sempton felt, oh my gosh, TJ was outstanding. He made some 10-bell saves in the game against BC. When BC made it a one-goal game, he didn't buckle either. He showed his confidence, and I think that's the key for both these guys. They had confidence in their games. I am curious to see how, though, they take it now to next week to the final and how it ends up looking on Monday.
So let's review these semis. Both teams that ended up on top jumped out to leads. And for BU, it got to 4-1 against Harvard. And then the Crimson battled back with 2 goals really quick at the end of the second period. And they make it a 1-goal game, and that's the way it ends, 4-3. And then BC fell behind 2-0. They get a goal kind of late in the third period, and their offense, I thought, really stepped up at that point for a penalty. Gave Northeastern that final power play. They put the game away 3-1. But I thought that the ebbs and flows of those games were really, I think that kind of created a lot of extra drama. But you saw the two teams that maybe bent a little, but neither one broke.
Right. Look, Harvard, I was impressed how they kept playing. They came back. They're missing two of their top guys, right, that are Brazizi and Farrell that are overseas. But they, even being down those 3 goals, they kept coming. They kept playing, but I thought BU overall was the much better team in that game, Jimmy. I who was awesome? 2 guys stood out to me. Awesome up front. O'Brien, he was great. Captain Logan Cockrell. Oh my gosh, he was just, you want to talk about dynamic and involved since the opening shift. He was great. I just thought the depth of the BU forwards were a lot for Harvard to handle. And yes, they gave goals, but they kept going. They got back on track later in the game. Was also impressed with the defense of Alex Vlasic, and I talked with Jay Pandolfo about Vlasic and how he has really blossomed into a hell of a player, a legit pro prospect that's at 6'6", 210 right now. He's probably going to be 225 when it's all said and done, when he grows into the body fully. Kid's a really, really good defender, and he was out there for a lot of good stuff. I think when all said and done, BU, yes, they allowed him back in. However, like you said, they bent. They didn't break. They were the better. They were the better team. With regard to Northeastern BC, I give Jerry York's squad all the praise in the world for being tenacious, for sticking with it. Not only missing 2 guys up front, but the 1 guy in the back end too, and Hellison, who's excellent. Right, this is a team that hasn't won in 9 games coming into that game, and they got down. They could have said, "Oh, it's another one of those." Pat Childs would not let them do that. He was a beast out there. And boy, does he love playing at the Garden between Beanpot and Hockey East, right? Northeastern, to me, is still going to have to be better. Their complete game. I did their game the other night against Vermont. Was not a complete game. They got away with the victory, though, with a crazy third period. I thought against BC, that was not a complete game. Again, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. They're going to have to be better if they're going to want to beat BU in the final.
Do you handicap this one and maybe say that if you had to look for an edge, it might still be BU just because of that offensive depth that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I do. The heaviness factor too. Look, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Harris. Tommy Miller, the grad transfer from Michigan State, has been big for Northeastern as well. They have some other good defenders there too. But I think the fact that, Albie O'Connell, at least against Harvard, rarely wavered against rolling 4 lines, Jimmy. He had those guys. He had those horses running. All of them were out of the barn, right? They were all getting after. They're all cycling. They were all attacking. What are they, 11-1-1 now in their last 13? Is it 10-1-1 or 11-1-1, if I remember correctly? Which one? But they're rolling. They're feeling. And I just feel in certain aspects of the game, overall, BU's got more depth than every team in the game. Look, this could come down to, this now legitimately could come down to, though, which backup goaltender is better on the brightest stage of the Beanpot final.
Well, it will be the 2 best fan bases, the most enjoyable fan bases of the Beanpot. That will be cheering. I guess that's the way they cheer against each other. They really do. The back and forth in the stands can always be pretty enjoyable. It should be a great Beanpot final next Monday night. Billy Jaffe from NESN, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's fun to talk college hockey. Great to be back in it right now, and looking forward to doing the Hockey East playoffs as well coming up in March.
More of the Game of the Week podcast coming up. This podcast is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Know how people say life happens? Well, for me, life was happening, and I needed a new truck. I didn't have time to shop around for a good loan, so I got one from the dealer, higher interest and all. Month after month, those payments were squeezing me. So I went to DCU. They refinanced my loan and helped lower my rate, which lowered my payments. These days, I have more money in my pocket for whatever life throws at me. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit DCU.org.
Welcome back to the Game of the Week podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, let's start with this week's Game of the Week, which is the Beanpot Championship on Monday, number 20 BU versus number 15 Northeastern. Of course, we don't know if they'll still be at those same poll rankings because they have other games in between, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. I was really impressed watching the games on Monday by the backup goaltenders. TJ Semtenfelter was phenomenal. He had to make 41 stops in that game. Hopefully they solve his equipment problems and he doesn't lose blockers to the end boards or anything like on Monday night. But I think that these two goaltenders may be the wild cards in this because, you've lost players here and there, but they're the ones who've really had to step up with the absence of the starting goalies on both teams.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't talk with Billy Jaffe about is experience, and Northeastern might lack a little bit of the depth in terms, especially up front. I think that the deeper team is certainly Boston University, but Northeastern does have one thing that none of the other three teams have, and that's Beanpots in their locker room. This Northeastern team tournament wasn't played last year, but they won 3 in a row in this tournament before that, and that ability in that to have the presence of being on that big stage in a big game. And, people outside of Boston might not understand how important this tournament is to these schools and their alumni. This is a date that these players circled, that a lot of them make a decision to go to these schools because they want to play in a Beanpot, and having the experience of winning it in the Northeastern locker room, that could be a difference maker. But make no mistake, BU should be the favorite in this game. And I think that it really could come down to which goaltender performs the best. And when you're talking about two goaltenders that don't have a ton of experience, that's always an interesting question mark.
I want to just drop in a sidebar here about the teams that'll play for the consolation on Monday, Boston College and Harvard. These are both teams who feel like, to me, that they've underachieved a bit this year, but it's not that they're playing badly. And certainly Boston College put up a great fight. When you put 42 shots on net and you're in it right to the end, that's not a bad performance. And Harvard getting those 2 quick goals was right back in the thick of it too. What is it about those two teams? Is it just something missing? Is it just puck luck? What's going on?
Well, with BC, I just think that they're, they lost an NHL first line and an NHL goaltender last season. And I think that they still haven't really filled some of those holes that were created by some early departures last year. And then you add in, the fact that they're missing, their best defensemen, they're missing 2 of their best forwards at the Olympics. And listen, those guys have not been gone for this entire 10-game winless streak that BC's in the midst of. But at the same time, just feels like there's so many holes. I think they're playing with a lot of heart. And you heard Billy Jaffe talk about Patrick Giles, and I think that there's one of your players that has a ton of character and played so hard and didn't want to see his team on the wrong end of the Beanpot on Monday. But I still think that when you just look at the holes on BC, that's one that's a little more difficult to expect too much from. This is a team that I think everybody just automatically has high expectations for the Eagles. This isn't their year. Harvard, I'm not sure. That team has so much depth. I don't know what doesn't click. Maybe you can kind of point to they haven't had, a standout goaltender, all season, and maybe that's an issue, but I don't know. That's the one that makes me scratch my head. People were picking both Northeastern and Harvard to meet in the finals, which, as we discussed on Monday, has never happened in 69 years of the tournament. I don't know where Harvard's falling off point is, because they have plenty of good players. They've got goals. They've been scoring goals since day one of this season. So when they struggle, I don't know exactly where to put it, but I think that maybe, the goaltending and defense might be their one Achilles heel. Well,
let's talk about the Terriers and the Huskies with a couple other games that are of note. They have Friday games in conference. Number 20 BU is at number 17 Providence, and number 15 Northeastern is at number 13 UMass Lowell. Let's start with BU at Providence. Obviously, we've talked about BU. They have been on a roll, and Providence, they have been uneven this season, or maybe streaky is a way to put it. They've had several times during the season where they've put a couple losses together in a row. They're coming off a win against Vermont. And you also have to consider, and I know this is more fan or media talk than coach or player talk, but you got to wonder about BU looking a little bit past that to the big game on Monday.
You know what? BU has been in a lot of Beanpot finals over the last 50 years, and they've always been in this situation. One of the things that they have done extremely well is focus on that Friday night game that's between the two Monday Beanpot games. They've been excellent at it. Actually, they've been a lot better than Northeastern has of late. So if you think about the team that might, get caught watching the paint dry a little bit, maybe Northeastern. But hey, going back to Providence, that's a team that's just, I've talked to Nate Lehman a lot lately. He even said it. I've said it to him. They're top 10 in almost every statistical category in the country. And he said, if you have that, you should be a top 5 team. And they're not. And they're not even close at this point. They've found ways to lose games. And I think it was last week he said sometimes the players almost care too much. And when they get into tight situations, tight games, they grip their stick a little bit too tight. They don't take the extra second to make the right play. They panic a little bit. And he said it's just something that they haven't necessarily gotten past. And, they had a great game last Friday down at UConn, but found a way to lose. And it's very frustrating, I know, for Nate Lehman and his staff, but that's a good team. And I will tell you, if they can get into the NCAA tournament, watch out for Providence.
Northeastern at UMass Lowell. I hate to use the phrase that Lowell has snuck up on people, but they've just been very quietly putting together a very good season. January 28th at Northeastern, a 2-1 win for the Riverhawks. How do you look at this one? I mean, it's another game for Sempton-Felter to get a little more comfortable in net, and maybe a chance to play against a team that is going to play a bit heavy to help them out for Monday.
Yeah, I think that this is a tough game to handicap. For Lowell, they had seen Devin Levi earlier this year. Now they're going to see Sempton-Felter instead in net, so that's a little bit of a change. So things are a little different. But Lowell, man, there's just something about Lowell that they play steady. I don't know what if there's a better term than that. They don't get rattled. They play very good hockey. They're very good attention to detail, and that's what they've been for 7-8 years now. They've played in the last, I think it's the last 9 years, they've played in the Hockey East final 6 times, winning it 3 times. And it always seems with Norm Bazin coach teams that as the season goes on, they get a little bit better. So it'll be an interesting one on Friday. I think that you have to, wonder again, as we kind of looked at the looking past factor. Will Northeastern, look past Lowell and think more about the following Monday? Who knows? That has been something that, was a little bit of an Achilles heel in the last few Beanpots. So we'll see where that takes Northeastern.
Let's turn to the Big Ten. This is a heavyweight matchup. Number 7, Minnesota at number 8, Ohio State. If anyone thought that the Gophers were going to lose a few steps with a goaltender turning pro, they've been proven wrong. Meanwhile, Steve Rawlick's Buckeyes sit on top of the Big Ten, and they were picked to be in last place. They along with Western Michigan, and got to be one of the 2 biggest surprises this season. This is huge, and this has very big pairwise implications. A sweep by either one of these teams probably just about clinches an NCAA berth for them, and they're already both very close.
They both are. And, I think, you sum that up really well. I've been really impressed with Minnesota, their ability to just basically next man up, and a backup goaltender jumps in and has played extremely well for them over the last month. And Ohio State, nobody expected it, but a young team that's playing well, and sometimes when you have some of those freshmen come into your program, make immediate impacts. Everybody wanted to talk about Michigan coming into the season, but here we are, last month of the regular season, and the two teams that I think are going to battle for the Big Ten title here are, Michigan and Ohio State. So what a heavyweight battle this will be this weekend.
And let's turn to the NCHC. We've got number 6, Minnesota Duluth, traveling to number 3, Denver. It was a rare Tuesday night game this week for Minnesota Duluth, the 2-2 tie, and then a shootout loss to St. Cloud State. Denver has been fantastic. They're 5 points ahead in the NCHC standing. 16 underclassmen. David Carl has done a terrific job with that team, and Magnus Krona has been outstanding in net. It's hard to pick against Denver right now. You got to think that the Pioneers could sweep or at least come away with a plurality of points.
Yeah, you don't pick against Denver right now. That's how strong they've been playing. But, you got a great team here in Duluth. I think they want to kind of just get on the right track. And, what better way to get your season jump-started down the stretch than to beat easily the best team in the NCHC right now in Denver. So if they could pull out, more than 3 points this weekend, take 4, take 5, or, take 6, boy, that would be a massive weekend for the Bulldogs. They could use it right now. I feel like that, I don't think that they're playing poorly. I think that they're in a tough league, and they'll get the train, going. Scott Sandelin's clubs always do down the stretch. We know that, national championships, Frozen Fours, they've been there for the last, 4 or 5 years. So I look at this as a good test, and we'll see. I think it'll tell us where Duluth is headed to into the home stretch of this season.
Well, and when you look at the standings in the NCHC, they're starting to divide top 4 and bottom 4 as teams look to get home ice for the first round of those playoffs. Right now, though, after the 2-1 split in points on Tuesday night, St. Cloud is 5 points behind Minnesota Duluth. They're going to have Western Michigan coming into the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center this weekend. So these are going to be some important points for Minnesota Duluth to try to pick up, because it's going to be a tough hill for St. Cloud. And you got to feel for St. Cloud, a team that was in the national championship game last year and is a very good team, just having to battle against such a tough NCHC this season.
They've struggled a little bit with the toughest games on their schedules, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. They just, there's just some really difficult opponents in that league. But I still like the St. Cloud team. You get them into the playoffs, and, especially when you get into the 1-game scenarios of the NCHC semifinals or the NCAA tournament, I like them in 1 games. They really impressed me last year, the way they played in the regionals, and then even, in the Frozen Four to get to the national title game. I think they ran into a buzzsaw in UMass in the finals. But this team has a lot of character, and, their coach, Brett Larson, does a great job of getting a lot out of these players. They'll get things together. I think that they're a dangerous team. Keep an eye on St. Cloud.
And you can read more about the odds and the probabilities on these games in this week's USCHO Bettor's Edge column. You can also see how the 10 Division I correspondents for USCHO do, whether they're experts at picking or whether they're blind squirrels finding a nut once in a while. This podcast episode has been brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.